Stop whatever you are doing right now, because the NFL just set itself on fire. We are talking about trades that nobody saw coming, contracts so massive they rewrote the record books overnight, quarterbacks bouncing from city to city like they're playing musical chairs, and one deal. One blockbuster, jaw-dropping deal that collapsed at the absolute last second in a way that shook the entire league to its core. We haven't seen a free agency period like this in years, maybe ever. Teams that were supposed to be rebuilding are suddenly Super Bowl contenders. Teams that looked like juggernauts 2 months ago are now scrambling for answers. And somewhere, right now, Aaron Rodgers is still sitting at home, unbothered, while the Pittsburgh Steelers sweat bullets waiting on him. The NFL in 2026 is absolute chaos. And if you think you already know how this story goes, I promise you, you don't. If you love the NFL and you love stories that go deeper than the headlines, hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you the inside angles, the real drama, the things they don't talk about on the morning shows. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this one is just getting started. To understand just how wild this free agency really was, you have to go back to the weeks before it opened. The NFL's legal tampering window was supposed to begin in a controlled, orderly fashion on March 10th, 2026. But the rumors were already leaking like a broken dam. Everybody in the football world could feel something big was about to happen. And the reason they could feel it is because the 2025 season had left a trail of chaos behind it. Quarterbacks who were supposed to anchor franchises had either failed, gotten injured, or worn out their welcome. Several elite defenders were hitting the market. The salary cap had ballooned again. Teams had money to spend, needs to fill, and desperation driving every decision. Into that pressure cooker walked some of the most impactful free agents in recent memory, and the league absolutely exploded. The moment the tampering window cracked open, one name stood above all others at running back. Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker III, who was bolting Seattle for Kansas City. Let that sink in for a second. The man who helped carry his team through a championship run, the reigning Super Bowl MVP at running back, walks out of Seattle and lands with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Walker signed a 3-year deal worth up to $45 million with $28.7 million guaranteed. Chiefs fans are going absolutely insane. Seattle fans were stunned. And the rest of the AFC immediately started doing the math on how on earth you stop a Chiefs offense that now has Mahomes throwing and the Super Bowl MVP running behind him. But here's the thing. That wasn't even the biggest story of day one. Not even close. Yardbarker NFL. The story that sent shockwaves through every NFL front office, every locker room, every sports bar in America was the Maxx Crosby saga. And if you don't know how this one went down, buckle up, because this is the kind of drama they make documentaries about. The Baltimore Ravens had agreed to send 2 first-round picks to the Las Vegas Raiders in exchange for their superstar pass rusher Maxx Crosby. 2 first-round picks. That is the currency you use to trade for a generational talent, a player who had been to 5 Pro Bowls, a man who was the identity of the Raiders' defense. And Baltimore was willing to pay that price because they wanted to build a terrifying defensive line unlike anything the AFC had seen in years. Ravens GM Eric DeCosta had even revealed that the plan was to land both Crosby and Trey Hendrickson, 2 elite pass rushers on the same unit. Think about that. Lamar Jackson with a defensive line like that? The Ravens would have been hands-down Super Bowl favorites before free agency even officially opened. CBSSports.com. But then it all fell apart. The Ravens' medical staff apparently did not like what they saw during Crosby's in-person physical. The 5-time Pro Bowler had undergone surgery on the meniscus in his left knee in January. And just like that, Baltimore pulled the plug on the entire deal. The entire NFL world began speculating about the saga. It doesn't smell right, one team executive told CBS Sports. How can a team ever trust the Ravens again? Asked one agent. Those quotes tell you everything about the temperature of the room. Nobody was quite sure what happened. Was it really the physical? Was it cold feet on the price? Was there something else going on behind closed doors? The Ravens nixing the Maxx Crosby trade and proceeding to tab Trey Hendrickson as his replacement was undoubtedly the biggest surprise of free agency. And the Raiders, who had been expecting to receive 2 first-round picks and clear a massive contract off their books, were suddenly left holding a player who was reportedly not happy about his situation in a locker room full of questions. CBSSports.com+2. Now, the Crosby situation left a domino effect that rippled across the entire defensive end market. Because while Baltimore was initially locked into Crosby, Trey Hendrickson, who had been waiting for his big payday after a career that included back-to-back 17.5 sack seasons, was suddenly in play. Through the two-day negotiation period, there was reportedly a gap of about $10 million per year between the contract Hendrickson wanted and what NFL teams were willing to pay. Hendrickson had missed 10 games the previous year due to injury and was now 31 years old. The market for him was uncertain. Teams were interested, but nobody was willing to hit the number he wanted. And then Baltimore swooped in. Trey Hendrickson signed a 4-year, $112 million deal with $60 million fully guaranteed and a maximum value of $120 million with the Ravens. There it was. The Ravens didn't get Crosby, but they got Hendrickson, and the pass rush unit they were building just got a whole lot more dangerous anyway. Meanwhile, Hendrickson got the money he had always wanted, money the Bengals had refused to give him. And the Bengals? They were sitting there watching one of their best defenders in recent years walk out the door to a division rival. The hurt was very real in Cincinnati. But while all of this defensive chaos was happening, the quarterback storylines were running on a completely parallel track, just as messy, just as dramatic, and just as shocking. Let's start with Tua Tagovailoa, because what happened with him was one of the most emotionally loaded storylines of the entire offseason. The Miami Dolphins finally announced their decision to release Tagovailoa. It was an expensive decision. Miami had to eat a record $99 million in dead cap over the next 2 years. Read that number again. $99 million. Dead cap. That is the kind of financial punishment that can cripple a franchise for years. And it wasn't just the money, it was the symbolism. Miami had invested everything in Tua. They believed in him when others doubted him. They protected him, rebuilt their line around him, gave him weapons. And in the end, the combination of injury concerns and inconsistent performance forced their hand in the most painful and costly way possible. And then, almost immediately, Atlanta came calling. Shortly after the Dolphins announced Tagovailoa's release, it was reported that the Atlanta Falcons were in pursuit. By the end of the day, it was confirmed that Tagovailoa would join the Falcons on a 1-year deal. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Falcons already had Michael Penix Jr. on their roster, a young quarterback who had been drafted to be their future. Analysts pointed out that Tua Tagovailoa is as injury-prone as Penix, and questioned whether the Falcons' new offensive setup under Kevin Stefanski had a particular plan to maximize Tagovailoa that his former head coach Mike McDaniel did not. So now Atlanta has 2 quarterbacks with significant injury histories competing for the starting job, and a fan base that is deeply divided on which direction to go. The Falcons went from a team with a clear young starter to a quarterback controversy practically overnight. Sports radio in Atlanta has not been the same since. CBSSports.com Sports Illustrated. Then there is the Kyler Murray story. Arizona made it clear they were releasing their former franchise quarterback, a player they had once signed to a massive extension, a player they had literally built their offense around. Murray signed a 1-year deal with the Vikings. And this makes a fascinating amount of sense and an equal amount of chaos. Minnesota had drafted J.J. McCarthy in the first round just a year earlier, and now they were bringing in Kyler Murray, essentially signaling that their patience with their young quarterback was running thin. The Vikings were appealing to Murray because of head coach Kevin O'Connell's track record with quarterback revivals. O'Connell turned Sam Darnold into a Pro Bowl quarterback. He gave Kirk Cousins his best statistical seasons. The man knows how to get the most out of a quarterback, and if anyone can reignite Kyler Murray's career, it might be him. But the Minnesota fan base is wrestling with a real question. What does this mean for J.J. McCarthy's future? Do you just throw away a first-round pick at quarterback because he had a rough first year? These are the kinds of decisions that define franchises for a decade. CBSSports.com Fox Sports. And speaking of franchise-defining decisions, let's talk about what the Rams did, because the Los Angeles front office made one of the most aggressive and calculated moves of the entire offseason. The biggest blockbuster trade of the offseason involved the Rams acquiring cornerback Trent McDuffie. McDuffie had been one of the most elite cover corners in football, and the Rams identified defensive consistency as their biggest weakness heading into the season. Over the last 3 seasons, McDuffie's PFF coverage grade was second highest among all cornerbacks, behind only Sauce Gardner. He was one of just 2 cornerbacks with 25-plus passes defensed and 10-plus QB hits in that same span. This was not just a good player being added to the roster. This was a transformational acquisition that changes how opposing offenses game plan against Los Angeles. Sean McVay already has Matthew Stafford. Now the defense is building an identity that matches the firepower on offense. Rams fans had been patient through some defensive struggles, and this was a signal that the front office heard them loud and clear. Now let's talk about money, and the deal that made everybody in the NFL stop and stare at their phones in disbelief. The Las Vegas Raiders signed center Tyler Linderbaum to a contract so large it didn't just set a new record, it absolutely shattered the previous one. The 3-year, $81 million deal paying $27 million per year was 50% higher than the previous highest-paid center, Creed Humphrey, and more than all but 2 left tackles. A center. They paid a center like a franchise left tackle. Linderbaum's deal was worth $9 million more total over 3 years than Humphrey's 4-year deal. The analytics community was buzzing. Every agent in the league was recalculating market value at interior offensive line positions. And the Raiders, who had just lost the Crosby trade situation, who had just watched their locker room absorb that confusion, came out and made the single most market-resetting contract in recent memory at the position. It was bold, it was aggressive, and it was the kind of statement that tells the rest of the league, we're not tanking, we are building, and we're going to spend. Over in Pittsburgh, the Steelers remained in a holding pattern around one of the most dramatic and drawn-out quarterback stories in recent NFL memory. Aaron Rodgers was still a free agent. As of late April 2026, Aaron Rodgers still had yet to sign with any team. Pittsburgh had been waiting on him. The relationship between Rodgers and new Steelers head coach Mike McCarthy, who spent 13 years coaching Rodgers in Green Bay, seemed like the perfect reunion narrative. But Rodgers was not in a hurry. I'm interested in what the conversation will be, but there hasn't been any progression when it comes to that. I'm a free agent, Rodgers said publicly. That quote drove Steelers fans absolutely crazy. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh was busy adding weapons, trading for Michael Pittman Jr. from the Colts on a 3-year, $59 million deal, and signing Rico Dowdle at running back. They were building an offense. They had DK Metcalf already. They had the pieces. All they needed was a quarterback to run the machine, and the man they wanted most was still sitting at home, giving cryptic answers on podcasts. The Geno Smith story is one that deserves its own chapter, because this is a quarterback who spent years being a punchline, famously punched in the jaw by a teammate, losing a starting job in the most humiliating way imaginable, and then rebuilt himself into a legitimate NFL starter in Seattle. Smith is heading back to the Jets, the team that drafted him in the 2nd round in 2013, where he had a rocky start going 12-18 as the Jets starter with 28 touchdowns compared to 36 interceptions. Now he returns as a veteran leader, a man who has been through the fire. Jets fans have complicated feelings about this. There is affection and nostalgia mixed with real skepticism about whether this is a step forward or a step sideways. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, the Eagles were making quiet but significant moves. Former Seattle cornerback Rick Woolen agreed to a 1-year, $15 million deal with the Eagles, joining a secondary that already had Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. That cornerback room in Philadelphia is now one of the most stacked in the entire league. And the Eagles were being aggressive across the roster, adding pieces that reinforced their status as a legitimate Super Bowl contender headed into 2026. Philly fans were feeling good. Very good. The San Francisco 49ers were also making a statement. Despite injuries that had plagued the team through the previous season, despite losing Brandon Ayuk and watching Jawan Jennings leave in free agency, San Francisco signed wide receiver Mike Evans, a player who had topped 1,000 receiving yards 11 straight times, tying the legendary Jerry Rice for the NFL record before suffering his first major injury-shortened season at age 32. Critics were skeptical. Was this a desperate signing for an aging receiver? Or was it a brilliant low-risk, high-reward gamble on a player who still had plenty left in the tank? The 49ers had desperately needed help at receiver after giving up on the disgruntled Ayuk and getting just 9 appearances from former first-round pick Ricky Pearsall in year 2. If Brock Purdy has a player like Evans running routes, San Francisco could be a very different and far more dangerous team than the one that limped into the playoffs in 2025. Down in New Orleans, the Saints were making eyebrow-raising moves of their own. Among the surprises was the Saints bringing in Travis Etienne as one of the NFL's highest-paid running backs. And this move was significant not just for what it brought in, but what it seemed to signal about the potential end of the Alvin Kamara era in New Orleans. Kamara had been the face of that franchise for years. He was one of the most unique weapons in football, a running back who could be used like a wide receiver, a mismatch nightmare for any defense. But the Saints seemed to be turning the page, and their fan base was split right down the middle on whether that was the right call. The New York Jets deserve their own extended mention here, because what Darren Moogie's front office did in free agency was nothing short of extraordinary. The Jets traded for both T'Vondre Sweat at defensive tackle and Minkah Fitzpatrick at safety before free agency even officially opened, then added linebacker to Mario Davis, pass rushers Joseph Asai and Kingsley Enagbare, and defensive lineman David Onyemata. The Jets were spending like a team that had been humiliated for too long and was done being patient about it. Fitzpatrick signed a 3-year, $40 million extension with the Jets. And keep in mind that Miami sent him to a division rival, a team they play twice a year. That is a brutal detail for Dolphins fans. The player who was your safety for years is now lining up against you in a Jets uniform twice every single season. And then there's Travis Kelce. Yes, the greatest tight end in NFL history re-signed with Kansas City. Kelce signed a new 1-year contract worth $12 million and up to $15 million. At this point in his career, Kelce playing one more year is a gift to football fans everywhere. And he's now got Kenneth Walker in the backfield. Patrick Mahomes is going to wake up every morning this season and feel dangerous, and the rest of the AFC knows it. The Bengals made one of the more stunning trade acquisitions when they landed defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence from the Giants in exchange for the number 10 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. Lawrence signed a 1-year, $28 million extension in Cincinnati. The Giants giving away a dominant interior defensive lineman like Lawrence for a draft pick was a move that had their fan base absolutely livid. But for Cincinnati, adding Lawrence to an already improved defensive unit alongside the new additions was a massive statement. What does all of this mean for the 2026 NFL season? It means parity has been blown apart, then rebuilt in completely unexpected ways. It means teams that looked like contenders yesterday have genuine questions today. It means teams like the Rams, Ravens, Eagles, Chiefs, and Steelers, depending on whether they solve their quarterback situation, are all legitimate Super Bowl threats. It means the AFC has become one of the most chaotic and competitive conferences in years. And it means that somewhere out there, Aaron Rodgers is still thinking about it, still deliberating, still holding everyone hostage to his timeline, while the 2026 NFL season counts down to kickoff. This free agency didn't just reshape rosters. It reshaped power. It rewrote alliances. It created storylines that will carry through all 18 weeks of the regular season and deep into the playoffs. The Maxx Crosby saga alone could be a series. The Tua to Atlanta story will be examined under a microscope every single week, depending on how the Falcons perform. The Aaron Rodgers situation in Pittsburgh will either become one of the great comeback stories in NFL history or one of the most expensive gambles a front office ever made on a quarterback in his twilight years. And in Las Vegas, a franchise that has had more drama than a primetime soap opera in recent years is trying to build something real. A center making $27 million per year, a revamped linebacker core, and a roster that is trying to grow up faster than anyone expected. The 2026 NFL season hasn't started yet. Training camps haven't opened. Preseason games haven't been played. And yet, there's already more to talk about, more to debate, more to be stunned by than in most entire seasons. That is what this free agency period was. It was a statement from the NFL that no matter how much you think you know about this league, it is always capable of surprising you. It always has another twist. It always has another story. and the story of the 2026 season is just beginning. Disclaimer: this video is based on publicly available reports, news sources, insider information, and ongoing developments as reported by NFL Network, CBS Sports, ESPN, Fox Sports, and other reputable outlets as of May 2026. Some information may be subject to change. This content is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All contract figures are sourced from publicly reported information and may not reflect final official terms.